Hello, and welcome to the Be Smart About Art show. My name is Susan J. Mumford. I'm an entrepreneur in the art market, the founder of Be Smart About Art, and the host of this show. Now, I am delighted to say that we have now been doing this show for 4 weeks, which is absolutely incredible. And what you're beginning to see is some rejigging of the format because a lot of it's really coming together and making a lot of sense. What we're now doing on Thursday evenings is we are presenting the storytelling session. And today we will be featuring something from my very own childhood, which is this little tree stump, which you can see that there's some text on top of it there. That is pencil writing from yours truly from when I was 11 years old. So what's happening with this program is that we are telling stories each and every week. It doesn't have to be from childhood, it could be another stage of life. We'll sometimes have guest speakers, sometimes it will be myself. And the thing about stories, this is that stories, if I apply this to the business of art, stories often help to sell art. They often help to sell products. It's often stories that people buy into. So somebody will be immediately responding to a work of art. And then it's once we start telling the stories of artists, the stories of a body of work, the stories of the piece itself, the story of the place where it's being displayed, the stories of the collector and the collector's connection to the piece. That's often what people really do buy into. And I really want you to think throughout the Thursday storytelling session, how you can tell stories in your own enterprises. I know myself as a speaker that so much of what I do is I tell stories from the stage, and right here I am now in the studio telling you some stories. So how can you apply this yourself in conversation, in email, in blog posts, down the road, if you're doing a virtual studio tour or a virtual conversation with an artist? There's so many different things that you can do, arranging virtual dinner parties with your collectors or artists or critics or whomever. And you're telling stories throughout that. So what are some stories from your life that you would like to tell other people? Make notes of those stories, write them down, have a list, have a go-to list. And actually it's incredible that one thing that I have discovered is with the Be Smart About Art book and the previous blog series that we produced, which we are picking up on a monthly basis soon, which we used to produce on a weekly basis, that was kind of an accidental storage facility for a lot of the stories of my life that I think I would have forgotten otherwise, and also stories from other people in the art world. So I might sometimes tell a story, not giving away names or certain details to give away people for confidentiality purposes, but stories that I've also collected in my many years as a mentor and a consultant to the industry. So let me get started with today's story. I trust you enjoy it, and we're going to have some really interesting, fun takeaways as well. So this tree stump. Let's go back to the late 1980s, small town America. I grew up in a cul-de-sac. I was the youngest child in the family, the only girl. Probably not surprising to people who see the work that I do, that I had to punch above my weight and stand up for myself and such. So yeah, I learned to use my voice back then. And in my cul-de-sac, there was a nice little plot of green in the middle. My dad actually is the person, there were maybe about 5 or 6 houses there around it. My dad is the one he's a keen gardener, turns out that I am as well. He's the one who looked after it. And there was a tree, and we called this tree the climbing tree. We loved it, and I saw it grow over the years. And by the time it got to the late 80s, that tree was 15 years old, way older than I was at the time, only a few years older actually. But to me, it seemed like it was ancient, this tree. And so we loved it, we climbed it, we played around it. When I was 5 years old, I had taken some sticks and planted them around the dirt underneath the tree, thinking that I was going to grow new trees. I mean, cute. I think I had actually pretty good ideas as a 5-year-old. That's not too bad. Got in trouble for it, but that's another story as well. I went away on summer camp for 5 weeks. Now, this was the longest summer camp that I ever attended. And although I was homesick for the first few days, I ended up helping somebody else who was homesick through a lot of the camp. And this was out in East Texas. It was a camp that I think my maternal grandfather had gotten me onto a register I think even when my mother was pregnant with me, perhaps, and back then you didn't even know gender of a child, so she was just presuming I would be a girl. It was a girls' camp. I don't know, but this was like a big girls' camp for me to be attending. And so there's this other girl who was homesick, and I had convinced her that she would come back the following summer, and I do believe she probably did. Now, why don't I know if she ever returned or not? Well, slightly giving away a little bit of what happened. So I returned from summer camp and arrived back in the cul-de-sac. The tree was not there. All you saw was bits of the tree on the ground. Lots of little stumps, leaves, gumballs. It was a gumball tree. I haven't actually seen this exactly in the UK. So they were not green, they were brown gumballs. And it was kind of, I think that they would be green and then they would turn brown, and they were very spiky. They would fall to the ground. And I remember having a selection of gumballs in a box in the garage because we would have gumball wars. And the reality is that I know that some of the next door neighbor boys, they'd started to climb the tree too tall. It's not particularly a point about gender, but it is interesting that it was the boys who did that and not necessarily the girls, but perhaps that was just coincidence at the time because there were more boys kind of slightly younger than myself. There was one girl, but she was probably a little bit too young. So yeah, the boys ended up, they would climb the tree too high. They were just very daring. And I remember being really upset that they would climb the tree so high. And the other thing is that my father didn't like gumballs. That was a reality. So here I returned from summer camp and the tree has been cut down. Nobody spoke to me. All I knew right then was that the situation had occurred during that 5-week period. I mean, how could the world change so much in a 5-week period to take down the climbing tree? Well, I immediately thought to myself, that's it. Never again am I leaving the neighborhood for a 5-week period. I am not returning to summer camp. I need to be here and look after things and make certain that a devastation like this never occurs again in the future now. This makes me wonder, what are your stories from childhood? What are some things that come to mind of yourself, or even things like this that are symbolic that you've got around you? I mean, I grew up in Arkansas and I have brought this to Lewis in England via London. That means that this baby's important. And amusingly, I found it wrapped in plastic in my old bedroom. There were actually 2 little stumps from the tree. And that was to preserve it, which is #BurySusan, which is a hashtag that came up at my wedding last summer. So let me read to you what I wrote on the tree stump in that summer in the late 80s. The tree was 15 years old when it was cut down. And tree with a capital T, so that's its proper noun, its name. Our climbing tree. Will never forget. Oh, and I wrote the date. That's very me. 1989. I've actually been missing that the date was there as well. We'll never forget. I've never forgotten. What does this say to us? How can this help us in our businesses? And how can you learn about yourself from these childhood stories? Well, I've prepared myself 3 little cheat sheet notes here. And the first one is the importance of communication and setting expectations. Was there a consultation in the neighborhood? Who was engaged about this? Was there actually much communication? And what about communicating to myself in the small instance of the family unit? Was that done properly, any of it? And what about setting of expectations, knowing that this had happened and there's somebody coming in who's involved in this scenario who's going to be surprised? Well, it turns out that there was a consultation. It was of the adults. Apparently my dad went round to the different households and spoke with people, and all the parents agreed that it was a good idea to cut down the tree. And I guess they split the costs or something of paying for that, because that would have been something that they would have done privately, I'm sure. That's just the way that I would guess that would have worked there. Perhaps getting approval by the town. Not exactly sure what they had to do on that one. So there was that communication. But what about communication with the kids? We were all really upset, and setting expectations for the person who is returning. So I do actually think that there's something to be considered. And in a consultation, might I, as a 10-year-old, was I 10? I was actually 11. As an 11-year-old, would I have potentially proposed some alternatives like cut the tree shorter, put a barrier around it, maybe split the duties of collecting the gumballs between the different houses, something like that? I imagine, knowing me, I probably would have come up with some ideas. So it might be that some different communication and setting of expectations might have taken place. Now, secondly, and this is where I really want you to be thinking about you, and something that is symbolic from your earlier years is yourself as a human. In this story, myself as a human, I was a community leader even back then. And that's really the reason I felt this responsibility. Is I would set up little networks in the neighborhood, this kind of thing, and I thought if I had been here, I could have done something about it. Now, it also might provide some caution as well about you as a person. Taking too much responsibility for things, taking too much ownership of things, needing to delegate some as well. So looking at your younger self and going, what can I learn from who I was back then? How does that inform my understanding of who I am today? And what are the great things? What are the things that are just me through and through? What are the things that maybe I could work on as well? And I really do think that when we look at these things from childhood, that you can learn a lot and capture those stories, just like I was saying. And the third point is, when you look back at that, to consider how you responded at the time, and if you had been an adult in the scenario, how might you have responded differently in it? That's very informative. I think that is just almost mind-blowing. If you write down the story of something that happened as a kid, and you go, okay, what do I think about the response that I had back then? What do I think about that today? And if I had been an adult in the scenario, whether it was a good story or a bad story or a challenge or whatever it was. I mean, this was quite a sad story for me at the time. A new tree, by the way, has grown in its place. I'm very pleased to say it was a very beautiful, still bit of land, and my dad is still actually there looking after it, which is incredible. I'm incredibly lucky to have him on this planet, continuing to look after that, and I get to enjoy it when I go back there. But thinking back to those stories, what would you do differently if you were an adult in that scenario? And really think about that. I mean, this could be stories of birthday parties. It could be your own birthday party. It could be somebody else's birthday party. It might be what happened on the playground when you were at school. What other things come to mind? Maybe in my personal life, going to the swimming pool was definitely reality. So I can remember stories from that. From when I was a teenager, things that happened in my theatrical club. That was an amazing free to attend event that so many kids were able to take advantage of. So thinking about things like that, how you got involved with things at your school. I remember one time running for election for some position on the school council. I didn't get it because I wasn't actually popular enough, and I didn't run again because I realized I wasn't a prep. I wasn't popular enough at that point in time to actually get the numbers, which is kind of sad. But what, again, can you learn from that? Maybe that taps in to, in my world, the fact that I'm a combination optimist realist. So I see the best in situations, I see the best in people, and I'm realistic with it, which is part of the reason that Be Smart About Art as an entity has responded in the way that we have to the COVID-19 situation, going, right, what can we put in place, thinking that this is our new norm and this is how we're going to be interacting for a while, and going ahead and lowering the expectations of going back to normality as we knew it, but then being able to make things happen in this new, different world. And so here we are talking about stories. I'm really looking forward to hearing stories from others, some of our one-to-one advisors, some other special guests, and more stories for myself in the future as well. So what I'm asking you to do today is to think back to some stories of yourself from your own childhood, to think about what you can learn about them today, what that tells you about yourself and how you might respond to things differently now. And that's all very helpful for thinking about how you do approach personal and professional life, certainly while we're going through this whole changing world. and thinking of the resilience you had as a kid and how tapping into that could really help you during this time as well. What are some things you love doing? What were some activities that you really enjoyed back then? And those again are more stories. So do share your stories in comments to this live post on Facebook. I really look forward to seeing those. And for everybody who's a Be Smart About Art member, please come join me now over in the member masterclass. We're going to be hopping in to a 40-minute conversation talking about storytelling and talking about how that applies to our businesses and talking about how we can tell stories as part of the sales process, the communication process. And you can tell stories visually, and you can tell stories with video. There's so many ways you can do it. So anyone who's a Be Smart About Art member, come over and hop into the call. The link is in the Facebook group event, I am aware. And the link, I believe, is also in the Patreon community. So anyone who's not yet a member, do check out patreon.com/Be Smart About Art. It's where a lot of the action is taking place, a lot of the support is taking place. Our membership program also enables this very program to continue. So do check out the Patreon program. And even if you're watching this video after the live stream, you'll be able to watch replay of the member masterclass afterwards. So that's usually added a week to 10 days after the live session. So you can still take advantage of the masterclasses that have happened in the past, and we're in the process of uploading previous masterclasses as well. As it says on the screen behind me, participate, connect, and grow. Those are really 3 of the key components of making it through this time and other times as well. You participate in communities, you connect with other people, and then you grow. You grow personally and you grow professionally. As we say at Be Smart About Art, we're here to help you thrive in an ever-changing art world. And throughout this crisis, we are keeping a theme specifically of keeping it simple and supportive. So I encourage you to think about how you can keep things simple, how you can be supportive of communities and ask for support when you need it as well. That's incredibly important. I look forward to seeing you again soon. I'll be signing out now from Lewes in East Sussex in England. And here is to carrying on the journey and also embracing creativity to the foundation of what you do. I've been Susan Jo Mumford. See you again soon.